All right, good to go? Okay, I guess we'll get started then. All right, so you're here for my talk about how to start a podcast. I want to preface this with, I'm not a pro, but for 2 years, me and a couple friends have been running a podcast, and it wasn't exactly intuitive to set up, so I thought I would talk about how I did it. I also run some video stuff on YouTube, which was also not exactly straightforward, so I thought I'd sprinkle that in here as well. So, who am I? I'm Gangriff on Twitter. You can also call me Nate. I'm a sysadmin of like 20 years. Well, I've got 20 years in IT. I've been a sysadmin for about half of that. A couple certifications. I'm also one of the admins of a DEF CON group up in Easton, Pennsylvania called DEF CON 610. If you're in that area, check it out. It's a fun time. First Wednesday every month. You can find us on meetups. I don't have the URL handy, but sorry, whatever. And I run the Iron Sysadmin podcast. This was an idea I had about 2 years ago. One of my co-hosts right here was the first guy that we decided, it was just me and one other guy, set this up. He's busy looking at his phone. He's ignoring me. So that's one thing I do. And the other thing I do is I'm a Jeep enthusiast. I run a YouTube channel about just like stuff I do in the garage and trails and some more of my things. It's just the things that I know, and the things that I know are the things that I talk about well. So there it is. So it's just a quick general outline of what I'm going to try to cover. That last item, making money, is still sort of elusive, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit. Both of my endeavors don't currently make any money. Basically, figure out your show, start recording it with what you've got, how to host your show, how to improve once you've got it posted and you actually have a listener base, and how to improve hosting once you're maybe making a little bit of money out of your show, or you've just decided that you're going to spend the money to have it hosted in a nicer way. And of course, then what you might do to make your YouTube channel or your podcast make some money for you. So the first thing starting a show is to figure out what the heck you want your show to be about. So choose yourself a totally unique topic, totally agonize about this, never talk about anything anyone else has ever talked about ever. I'm being sarcastic. What I mean to say is it doesn't matter if someone else has already covered the topic. If you want to talk about brain surgery, make sure you know what you're talking about. But if there's 100 other podcasts on brain surgery, then just make yours a little bit unique, and that's good enough. We started our show, we talk about systems administration, operations stuff, and it was mainly because I didn't find a lot of shows that really filled that niche. Some of them have shown up since then. There were a couple when we started. I feel like we do a pretty good job of it, but others do a good job too, and really it's just all part of an ecosystem, right? So one more voice in the crowd isn't necessarily nothing. It's beneficial. Bring your own perspective to the topic, whatever your topic is, and get it out there. And if people want to hear it, you'll have listeners. Or viewers, sorry. Then you want to choose a format. So you could do, and what I mean by format is not media, we're going to cover that later, but what kind of show do you want to run? Is it going to be a how-to show? Is it going to be like a news show? Is it going to be something a little more free-form than that? Is it going to be an interview show? Did I cover that? I don't remember. Iron Sysadmin is sort of a combination. We do a little bit of news. We do like a main topic where we just sort of put our opinion out there on certain things. And we also just have some general chit-chat and banter between a bunch of people that work in the IT field. Something like an interview show, like we've done an interview or two, and that may expand in the past. That's a great way to get content into a show that maybe, that way it's not 100% generated in your head. It's just a conversation between you and some pro in the industry or whatever. But again, just make it what you want it to be. You don't have to stick to a certain mold, but think about what you want it to be before you start recording. That way you're not sort of scattershot all over the place. The next is choose a medium, and by that I mean, do you want it to be just audio only, like a podcast? Do you want it to be a video podcast, which is the thing that people are doing now? Do you want it to be just a plain old, video channel of some sort where you're making episodes of something? And it doesn't matter what those things are. It could be, like I said, how-tos. It could be, maybe you're making cartoons, whatever it is that you want to produce and put out there. But you want to figure that out at the beginning, obviously, because that informs a lot of how you're going to do it, how you're going to host it, and whatnot. And then choose hosts. So I find this to be really important. I actually did not record a single episode of Iron System In until I found a co-host. Luckily, Jason was happy enough to join me once we figured out scheduling that worked for both of us. I don't feel like a show like Iron System In would be successful if it was just me talking into a mic. Because I think it would get bland, and I think it would get repetitive, and I find it to be a lot easier when you've got someone to sort of banter with, right? And it's a lot more entertaining that way. If you're doing something like an interview show, maybe you can do that with one host, because you've always got a partner that is the person you're interviewing, right? So you have banter. Not to say that 2 or 3 people can't interview a person, but if you get too many people, then that could just get really chaotic, right? So I always use the example of like Paul Security Weekly. They've got a bunch of hosts that rotate in and out, and they do interviews with, sometimes just with Paul or with 1 or 2 people, or sometimes they do it with 3 or 4 people, and sometimes it gets really chaotic and hard to follow, and sometimes it's really well put together. And he's been doing this forever. He's got a whole series of shows. So just another example. Make sure your hosts are dependable, or at least that you have enough hosts that you can always get at least one of them around to record a show. We have skipped episodes of Iron System In because I couldn't get hosts to show up on a given night, and it's fine, life happens. I hate missing shows, but whatever. I'd rather have at least one co-host than just me sitting in front of the mic, because I think it's just, I don't know, I don't think Iron System In would work with one host. And importantly, make sure you have a rapport with your co-hosts. This is just a quick screen grab from one of our, we record live on YouTube, so people can watch us live when we're recording. And this is just a quick screenshot from one of our sessions. You can see everybody's smiling, everybody's animated, and I think that's really important. If you have dry co-hosts, you have a dry show, right? So the folks that I co-host with are people I've known for years. In Jason's case, I think I've known you, 20 years, right? We carpooled for a long time, like before we ever decided to make a show like this. So we've had a lot of conversations. I knew that we could chat together. And the people we've added in since then are just people that I consider friends, not just coworkers or professionals in the industry. And I think that's important. Otherwise, you could end up with just a bunch of arguments on your show, or you could end up with a dry show or a show where things don't flow as well. So
I'd watch a show where you 2 argue all night.
That could be things that we do sometimes, but there are things we disagree on. So that's fine. So now you've got the checklist. You've got a unique topic that you've agonized over for months. You've got a format, you've got a medium, and you've got a host, or hosts, I should say. So what do you do now? And this is the part where things get a little murky, right? Getting all that stuff together is relatively easy. I think I threw that together in a couple of nights. The next thing I did was I tried to pick out like a theme for the show and whatnot. But you don't necessarily have to do that right off the bat. You can just start. Start recording. Take the microphone you've got on your headset you use for Skype calls, or the internal microphone in your laptop or whatever, and just get on a call with your co-host or get on a call with the people you're interviewing and just start recording. I don't care yet about the quality. I don't care if you've got syndication on iTunes and all the other places where people get podcasts. I don't care if you even know you have an audience yet. Just start recording. Get it out there. Let people know that you've got a show. Let people start listening to your show. The biggest thing that I've seen when people want to start a project, a show or anything, it's okay to come out the gate with an awesome show. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. Obviously, if you have the capability and you have the equipment, then do that. But if this is your first show, your first time you're trying to set something up, first time you're trying to record something, you may not have expensive equipment. You may not have a mixer and a good mic and a soundboard and even great internet service, right? Just start recording something. When we started Iron System In, well, I'll talk a little more about how to get recording done. When we started Iron System In, I couldn't even figure out how to get a recording of an internet call set up. Like just to we were going to use Hangouts, right? I couldn't figure out how to get the audio out of Hangouts onto my machine. So we ended up with a workaround that I'll talk about a little more later.
Okay, what's up?
Well, like I said, we'll talk about that later. So this is the first video that I made for my YouTube channel. It's literally me sitting at my dining room table, recording myself, working with some paracord on the camera on my tablet. Okay, and I can't play it because we didn't arrange sound and whatever, but basically, I'm not in frame, you can't see my whole face. I mean, the whole point was to show the paracord, but whatever. It's blurry, it's bad quality, it's just not a great video. You really want to?
I mean, you can. Your sound is set up.
No, it's okay. If you want to see it, go look up my YouTube channel. It's one of the oldest videos I have up there. Another video that I did was I had bought this like portable tire changer. I don't think anybody's ever changed a tire. I don't just mean change a tire off your car. I mean like actually unseated the tire from the rim, the thing that you normally pay a professional to do. Well, I had this idea that I was going to try to mount my own tires for my Jeep. And I bought from Harbor Freight, which everyone who's ever worked with like cheap tools will know what I'm talking about, Harbor Freight. They sell anywhere from like cheap crap to like decent tools for a good price. And you never know what you're going to get until you've bought it, right? So I got this cheap $20 manual portable tire changer, which is basically like a post that stands this high and has a flat surface to put a wheel on. It's got this big breaker bar. You can unseat a tire and reseat a tire. And I thought, I'm going to record myself, learn how to use this thing, and I'm going to make a YouTube video out of it, and that's going to go up on my YouTube channel. I mean, not a great video. I think I recorded it on the same tablet I recorded this on. It was hanging on the wall in my garage. The sound isn't great. It was a really long video, which people say you shouldn't really do on YouTube, so I had to cut it down. I was using open source tools to do the video editing because I didn't have any money for expensive editing software. The video came out, I mean, not great. It could have been worse, I suppose. And I didn't know what I was doing. Not just on the recording part, but using the dang tire changer. Like I changed one tire and then I recorded the second one. It's like, well, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it well without making myself sound terrible. But I'll just say that it's not a great example of how to use this thing. It is the top viewed video on my channel, like 3,000 or 4,000, right? People either love it or hate it, and they all talk about it. There's hundreds of comments either telling me what a moron I am or the sort of viewers you're going to get. But the point is, I didn't agonize over getting a 4K video camera before I recorded my first video. I just made the dang thing and put it out there. So that leads pretty well into how the heck do we start recording. And of course, this depends on a couple of things. One, whether you're doing an audio show or a video show, and two, how many hosts you're going to have. So in the case of an audio show, like I was hinting at before, getting yourselves all on a Skype call or a Hangouts call or whatever and doing a show is relatively easy. Just arrange some time, start talking about something. Recording it I found to be less intuitive, or at least 2 years ago when we were doing this. Free services generally didn't offer a way for us to have a call and then quickly download a recording of it. I know some do that now. But at the time, like Skype, for example, there were these third-party tools you could use to record Skype calls, which seemed kind of hokey. And I heard from other podcast hosts that it was hit or miss. Didn't work well, or it worked well, but you had to pay for it to get it to work well, or whatever. And we were trying to get this started with little or no money out of pocket. So what we ended up doing, if anybody's familiar with the Defensive Security podcast from Jerry Bell, I had chatted with Jerry Bell years ago at DerbyCon, so I kind of had a little bit of a relationship with the guy, and he had just recently started up a Slack channel. So I went out on a limb and I just asked him, you know, I want to start a podcast, how would you recommend I record? And he suggested this, looking back at it now, I don't know how we ever survived this way. He suggested this idea where Jason and I both get on a call, fire up Audacity or something on your laptop, because your microphone goes into your laptop to get to the thing, and just record yourself locally, right? Because that'll record your input, but it doesn't record what's coming back out of the call, right? The trick is, you have to get yourselves synchronized, right? So I'd be recording me, he'd be recording him, and to get the conversation synchronized again, we did this like weird thing where we would count down from 5, he would go 5, I'd go 4, he'd go 3, right? Go back and forth. And then after the show was over, he'd have to upload that to me, which would take half an hour, depending on how long the show it was. And then I'd have to stitch this together. And once it was stitched together, I'd have to edit out any mistakes I thought we made. I'd have to put in intro music. I'd have to put in any transition music we used, which I don't think we were at the time. Outro music, you know. It ended up being a 2-hour production after the show was over, just to get the show back out. So we pretty quickly upgraded, and I'll talk a little more about that when I talk about how to improve afterward. But the point is, we did it, and our first dozen shows or so were produced that way. Maybe not even a dozen. I think I was really sick of that. Videos, not the 2 examples I just gave you, but when I finally decided, like, I'm going to make a thing out of this channel, I used just a handheld camera that we had already, didn't even do 720p, right? And that's what I was using on a tripod that I had that was like 30 years old that I found in the attic. No sound gear, just, you know, set it up in the garage, start doing a thing. Again, that I've also improved over the, well, year and a half or so that I've been doing that channel. Right, so this I sort of already covered. I'm sorry, it's kind of a repeat slide. But basically, you get yourself a mic of some sort. Could be the internal mic on your laptop, could be a gaming headset. We started, for our mics, let's see, I had a gaming headset from Kensington, I think it was. I still use the headset today because the headset's nice, but the microphone was like a detachable thing. Just a plain old gaming headset that was decent quality. And I think Jason was using a Bluetooth headset that was a couple years old, and you could tell the audio quality difference. We actually had listeners write in and say, like, you sound great, Nate, but Jason sounds terrible. I don't know what's up, but you should improve his stuff. And that was like a running gag for a while. And it was because of the Bluetooth mic. I'm sure there's high quality Bluetooth mics out there, but for whatever reason, the one he had, and I had the same one, and I didn't use it because I noticed this before I started recording, it sort of digitizes your voice. And when you had the analog mic I was using, compared to his digitized voice, you could tell the difference. You could absolutely tell. If we were both using digitized mics, it probably wouldn't have been as noticeable. But mine was like plain old RCA jack audio, analog, and the sound pickup is just a little bit different. That's all there is to it. We fixed that later, and I'll talk about that when we talk about upgrading. Recording conversations I sort of already hinted at. Like I said, this wasn't straightforward. I thought it would be easy. I thought it would be like, oh yeah, just fire up a voice call and there must be some way to record it. Can't I just hit the record button on my laptop and get it all? Well, it doesn't quite work that way. We ended up, once we decided to do live shows, we ended up using Hangouts on Air, which is basically how you do YouTube Live. So Iron Sysadmin has its own YouTube channel, and all we use it for is to do the live show every time we record. And like I said, I'm sure there's services out there that'll let you record your calls. Look into that. If you're going to start a show and you don't want to go through the craziness I just described with the 2 recordings, see if you can find a place, see if you can find a service that will let you just record the audio and output it. I'm sure someone exists, but I just didn't find one readily accessible when we started Iron Sysadmin. Recording videos, like I said, just start with what you've got. I mean, I know a lot of YouTubers that are very successful now who started by recording on their iPhone. You know, just get a video, make it as best you can, stabilize it somehow so it's not all shaky and weird, and just do the best you can with what you've got and start producing videos. And if your channel catches on and you start making money or you get a sponsor or whatever, you can upgrade later. I still don't have really good camera equipment for my Jeep stuff. I use my smartphone sometimes. I have a couple GoPros. I can chat about that a little more too. But I've got a couple GoPros that I can use for different angles. GoPros are great for this kind of thing, at least for that setting, because they're durable and they have the nice wide view, so you don't have to worry about whether you're in frame or not. And some people don't like the fisheye look, but whatever. And then, once you've got your show established, you've got some listeners, maybe you have income, I don't know. Like I said, none of our shows make money yet. Then start thinking about what to improve. In our case, the first thing was the mics. So we wanted to get Jason a better mic, so he ended up buying himself the same mic that I had, eventually purchased myself, which was an Audio Technica mic. It does USB or it does XLR. So USB can go right into your computer, it works just like any other microphone, and it's good to go. I ended up putting in a mixer, and then I have an input for a tablet to do like a soundboard on, and then I bought a voice recorder that the whole shebang outputs to. So the whole show gets recorded out of the mixer, right? So my mic goes XLR into the, XLR is those 3 or 4 prong mics you see like professionals using. That goes into the mixer. The output from my PC goes into the mixer. The output from the mixer goes back into the PC. So this gets confusing, right? So that the people on the Hangouts call can hear me speak, because my mic goes into the mixer, not the PC. It's all kinds of convoluted. But the point is, the mixer gives you the control to do that kind of stuff, right? I can set it up so that the input from my PC gets out to the sound recorder, but doesn't go back to the Hangouts call, because that would cause an echo for all the people on the call, right? So that's not a good thing. You don't want to have an echo. It makes it sound weird, especially for the people watching live on YouTube, right? So, but yeah, that works out really well. And the little sound recorder is literally like, it's like the size of this thing. And I just plug the output of the mixer into the recorder, and then if I want to take that on the road, like if I'm at a conference and I want to do an interview with somebody, I can just take the sound recorder with me. I can even plug in an external mic if I really wanted to. And I can get the same quality recording just right there in my hand without all the extras of the mixer anyway. And like I said about the cameras, I think I mentioned this. I'm still not up to 4K cameras and whatnot for my Jeep stuff because 4K cameras are expensive. As much as I'd really like one for lots of things, not just my YouTube endeavors, just to record life with, you know. So yeah, I got a couple GoPros to get angles, and I already said that. So. Hosting was not as difficult for me as it might be for some people because of the IT credentials that I've got. I've done web hosting for like half my career. So it really wasn't that hard. I already had a website stood up. It was running on Drupal, and I decided to host the podcast Iron Sysadmin on that, which was not as easy as you might think. Drupal's a great platform, but it's really free form, and it's not as easy to use as something like WordPress. I was able to make it host the podcast. It was a lot of work, and I needed a lot of knowledge of how Drupal did things to really make it work the way I wanted it to. So I would recommend, unless you've already got a Drupal site set up, you probably want to avoid that for hosting your podcast. And as much bad press as WordPress gets, it works. You just make essentially a blog entry and attach an audio file to it, and your podcast is published. Simple as that. It already has built-in RSS feeds, which I'll talk a little more, well, I'll do that now. The RSS feeds, getting it syndicated and whatnot, which I'll talk a little more about, that's like iTunes and all that stuff. All iTunes and Google Play and Stitcher, they all want a certain format to your RSS feed. Google has a service called FeedBurner, which if you've ever subscribed to a podcast, you've probably used the FeedBurner URL to do it if you've done it in an RSS feed. FeedBurner cleans that all up, adds your logo art to it, adds all the metadata that all of these various consumption places want, and then publishes it back out for you. It even keeps some metrics for you. So that's handy. And WordPress and FeedBurner just work really well together. So if you don't have a site already and you want to figure out how to host it, I would say use WordPress. And you can pay someone to run WordPress for you. If you don't want to be a web administrator, just go someplace that hosts WordPress. You can find them all over the place for like $5 a month WordPress hosting, right? So, right, so I already sort of covered this. This is almost a duplicate, but basically publish the RSS, let FeedBurner clean it up for you, and then you can syndicate that, which is something I'll get in a future slide here. Professional services for podcast hosting. I haven't gotten here yet, but I know some podcasts that have. If you want to avoid all that and you just want to spend about $80 a month on letting a professional host your podcast for you, you can do that with places like Libsyn, and I think there's a couple others, where you pay them, they give you a website to host your show notes and whatnot on, they give you media hosting for your audio files, they give you metrics, you can pay a little extra and they'll make you like a mobile app for your podcast. Like they have all kinds of these extra value-added services that you don't have to worry about if all you want to do is record and publish, right? So Libsyn's one of them. I haven't looked into a lot of them because we're just not there yet. What we do is we host on WordPress, and then I had a couple complaints about the download speeds for our shows because it was hosted on a server in my basement. We ended up putting them onto an Amazon S3 bucket, and then from the WordPress site, I linked to the show on the S3 bucket, so when people download the show, it comes right from Amazon. It's super fast. That, of course, costs money. We're spending like $30 a month right now on hosting our shows. That goes up a little every month, obviously, because you're paying for bandwidth and you're paying for storage. Once that gets closer to $80, $90 a month, I'm probably just going to throw it at Libsyn, because I'm going to be paying that much anyway. I may as well get the benefit of having a professional hosting service, right? So I don't know if we're going to get there anytime soon, but when we do, I think that's what we're going to do. So there is value in spending that money, as long as you're not trying to do this on the super cheap, which is how we started Iron System, because I do everything on the super cheap, just the way I am. Video hosting, this one's not quite as mysterious. If you're going to host video, just use one of the platforms that exist. There's YouTube, there's Vimeo. I've seen a lot of podcasts showing up on Twitch. I don't know what the attraction is to Twitch, but a lot of, especially live shows, are showing up on Twitch. I don't know if it's because these people are gamers and they like Twitch because it's the platform they use to stream gaming, and they just think, oh, I'll do a podcast. Or if it's really that much better for it than YouTube is. I can say that YouTube is convenient, but you're their product, like any other Google property. Getting money out of your YouTube videos, like in the case of my YouTube channel, not Iron System, because Iron System I don't expect to make money from YouTube out of, because it's just not that kind of channel. It's really just to facilitate the live shows. But my Jeep channel was monetized for a short time, and then YouTube changed the game. They changed their monetization model, and they basically just took it back away from me, which was really annoying. But they're happy to show ads in your video, and they're happy to collect the money for those ads. And until you hit their thresholds, which are now really hard to hit for small channels, you don't see a dime, right? And once you get their thresholds, you see like fractions of a dime. So I always, whenever I run into someone who's like, oh yeah, you run a YouTube channel, I want to be like a rich YouTuber, my first response is nobody makes money on YouTube. Because yes, people make money on YouTube, but this many people make money on YouTube. The people that are famous, Logan Paul and whoever else, they're making money on YouTube because they're this big, right? Little guys don't make anything on YouTube. So if you're trying to pick a platform because of its monetization, YouTube might not be a great choice. Now, we can talk a little more about how to augment that with advertisers or whatever a little bit later. And then syndication, I've already hinted at this. If you're running a podcast, you're going to want to get it on all of the big podcast platforms. The ones that we do for Iron Sysadmin are iTunes because, Apple Podcasts, they rebranded. Because everybody, if you have a podcast, it's got to be on iTunes, right? They're like the podcast game. And then Stitcher is all about podcasts. Some people have never heard of Stitcher, some people have, some people that's the only place they go for shows, and if they're not on Stitcher, they don't listen to them, whatever, so you'll want to be on there too. And then Google Play Podcasts, I did just because it seemed like a good idea. I don't know how many viewers we really get from Google Play's podcasts, but it's there. And that's all from that RSS feed I said that's on FeedBurner. Every single one of them, I point to the FeedBurner URL, and they just do their thing. There's almost no work that you have to do to make sure that every now and then you want to check in and see if you got any reviews or whatever. But as far as getting the show listed, once you get it accepted and they're happy with your URL, with your RSS URL, it just works. It just keeps working. So, and this is important, I think, especially with a YouTube channel. So imagine that you're watching cable TV and there's a show you watch every week on Tuesday night at 8 p.m. You're going to tune in every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. to watch it. Now I'm going back to the days when on-demand wasn't as easy as it is, or you didn't have a DVR, right? People have just come to expect that from any content they consume. So if you're going to make a show live, you're going to want to do it at the same time roughly every week or every other week or whatever your schedule is. And you're going to want to stick to the schedule. If you have trouble with a certain night, don't get too stressed out. So last week, 2 weeks ago I think it was, we were supposed to record Iron Sysadmin, and stuff came up. And we just couldn't get the hosts together and whatever. We're like, all right, we'll record Thursday. And then Thursday didn't work. Okay, we'll record Friday. Friday didn't work. We ended up just skipping the show. Because that's the way it generally goes. You know, I've got Wednesday night picked, and if we miss Wednesday night, probably there's a 50-50 chance we're going to record it later in the week. Generally, it just doesn't happen. But people are going to want consistency out of your show. So if I'm going to go subscribe to a new podcast, if they got one show listed there, and it was from 2 years ago, I might not even bother subscribing, because they don't appear to be consistent, they don't appear to have a lot of content to listen to. Maybe that one show is awesome and I'll listen to it, but if they've got 24 shows that are consistent over the course of several months or weeks or whatever, I'm going to be more likely to watch their show, or listen to their show, just because, you know, it's, you interrupted my thoughts. Just because it shows that they're actually there to produce something that they want to produce, and you'll have repeat content out of them. With a YouTube channel, it's even more important, because the more consistency you show on a YouTube channel, the more likely YouTube is to recommend your channel to people. And this all comes down to Google's mysterious algorithm. You'll hear YouTubers talk about the algorithm as though it's like this god they have to appease. But basically, what it really comes down to is, if you want your videos to show up in YouTube search, or if you want to show up in that little suggested YouTube viewers or suggested videos when you're watching a video, you need to have, your channel has to fit a certain mold. It's got to have content, it's got to be consistent, it's got to have a lot of viewers, your videos have to have a lot of likes, people have to be commenting on your videos, you have to make it look like you're engaged. Otherwise, YouTube ignores you and no one sees your videos. No one sees your videos, you don't get subscribers. You don't get subscribers, you never get money out of your channel. So it's annoying to have to deal with all these weird constraints when all you really want to do is make content and put it out there. But if you don't do it, you don't get what you want out of your channel. If you've got a channel and you're producing content, I'm assuming you want people to see it. Otherwise, why would you be doing it, right? So it's unfortunate. And there are probably hundreds of YouTube channels that just talk about how to be successful on YouTube. So it sounds kind of meta. There are people that sell services, that they'll come in and help you build your YouTube channel so it appeases the metrics that they want. Like, it's kind of mind-blowing. And that comes down to making money. Personally, I don't love when I'm listening to a show and they have to take a break for ads, but now I understand why they do it. Because it's your time, it's costing money to run the show, you're buying equipment, or you're paying for hosting, or whatever. Some people can afford to just pay that out of pocket, and that's what we've been doing so far. But it's really nice to make a little bit of income on that, so that you can really produce the best show that you can produce, right? The sort of stuff I'd be doing both for Iron Sysadmin and for my Jeep stuff, if they had income, it'd be a whole different game, right? Because I'd actually have income to put back into the channel. It's just like running a business, except a much smaller scale, right? As a business, you've got a lot more expenses to deal with. But, so yeah, a few ways that you can make them without advertisements is built-in monetization, like I already talked about, with whatever platform you're on. That's mainly something like YouTube. I don't know if Vimeo, and I think Twitch does something with subscribers. When you subscribe to a channel, there's actually a monetary component along with that. But Patreon is what I've been using for both of my channels. My Jeep channel has 0 patrons. Nobody's giving me any money to do what I do. I wish they would, but they don't. Iron Sysadmin, it sort of ebbs and flows. We were up to like $30 a month we were getting out of it. That's dropped off because people are essentially donating to you. And unless they're seeing a lot of value there, you know, that tends to drop off. So it's gone up and down. I think we're at like $10 a month now. So, but that's one way to do it. I know some successful podcasts make a couple $100 a month out of Patreon. And that would be plenty to run a podcast, right? Because there's not a lot of expensive stuff that goes along with running a podcast. So anyway, that's most of what I got. If you have any questions, you know, feel free. This is me, where you can find me, and the channels that I talked about during this talk. So if you got any questions, shoot. We still got some time left. Plenty of time. Sure.
So if you did host a podcast and you got some money saved via Patreon, what would be the tax implications?
So I haven't really approached that because we've made so little. I think if you were making a decent amount, yeah, you'd have to report that on your income taxes. At that point, I don't know if you want to incorporate the podcast or something so it's its own entity. I'd imagine if you're big enough, that's the way to go about it. But yeah, I can't say I'm a tax expert, but I can say that if we were making hundreds of dollars a month on the show, I'd probably be reporting it to my accountant at the end of the year.
I didn't know if there was a threshold below which everything's fine and above which they'll say I'm really expects you to kick in.
That I don't know. I hope it doesn't burn me. Like I said, we're making so little, it's more like pocket change, right? So, yeah.
So how much time do you put into these, like pre-production, actual recording, and post-production?
So with the mixer and everything, podcast night is about 3 hours for me, maybe 4 hours, right? We'll start around like 6:30 or so, and then all the hosts have to get together, and then we're generally live by like 7 or 7:15, and then we record for anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then maybe an hour after that, I'm editing, because the output from the mixer is almost ready to go. I basically clean up the audio a little bit, edit out stuff that was obvious mistakes or gaps, or like, if we made a mistake that there was, something said that shouldn't have been or whatever, we'll edit that kind of stuff out. The video we leave public afterward. However we recorded it, it stays up there, unless somebody makes a really big mistake, which we only had once. One of the guys who's now a co-host was on, and he said something about another person that he knows, about how they were doing a thing, technology-wise. And after the show, he's like, I don't mind if you leave it in, but can you edit this one little piece out? Because I think that was data, that was something that they wouldn't want published. So in that case, I went and I depublished the live stream, downloaded it, which YouTube lets you do once you've recorded it, edited that piece out with a video editing app, and re-uploaded it, right? And I, of course, edited it out of the audio. But otherwise, it's not a whole lot of editing that goes into the show now that we have the mixer and all that stuff, because everything just comes out of the output of the mixer ready to go almost.
Can you provide further details on the video editing app?
Sure. So I started with, so I'm generally a Linux guy, even though I'm running this MacBook. I started with an application called Kdenlive, which is a KDE open source video editing app, and it worked okay. The UI was kind of horrible, and it would crash every now and then. I'd lose the work I was working on. So I started looking for a different one. I upgraded to another one called Lightworks, which is a little more popular. You can actually pay for this one, or there's a free version that'll do only up to like 720p. It doesn't do high def, or true high def or 4K. That worked pretty well. That also runs on Linux. I would have stuck with it, but I did run into a couple issues with it. The UI still wasn't great. This is the sort of, you'll notice a trend. When it's software that you can get for free, it's generally not as intuitive. Eventually, I realized that through work, I had access to Adobe's suite of applications, and I started using Premiere. I checked with work first to make sure it was okay for me to use this for a non-work related thing, and they're like, yeah, go ahead. As long as it's on your work laptop, go ahead. And it changed my life. Adobe Premiere is night and day different than any of the free tools that I use. I'm not saying you should rush out and spend all the money on Adobe Premiere, but if you have the means, do it. I also use Adobe Audition now for the podcast editing, which isn't quite as night and day. Audacity was a pretty good app, I'll have to say, and that's free. So, yeah.
What's your listener base, and how many people watch you live?
Metrics is a hard thing for me. I'm not good at this sort of thing. I can tell you that we have what could be thousands of people downloading the show. Like, that's just from the metrics that I get out of S3, right? I have a sort of other service called S3 Stat, which just, it basically gets you like weblog analytics out of your S3 bucket. I don't know if those are bots. I don't know if we really have thousands of listeners. It doesn't feel that way because we don't get a lot of feedback from people. I do say we have a decently strong listener base, and we have people tune into our YouTube channels and whatnot, or the YouTube channel to watch us live, which makes me feel like people are really listening and they're tuning in to really see us do this stuff. I can say that on the YouTube channel, after the live broadcast is done, almost no one goes back and watches the videos. Maybe it's because the channel is small, maybe it's because I don't tag them well, I don't know, but people aren't just stumbling across our shows on YouTube and watching them. So, yeah, I can say that we have listeners, we have more than one or two, but I have trouble believing that we have thousands, even though that's what the statistics from S3 are telling me. So, that's another thing that something like Libsyn would help with. They put the work into getting meaningful statistics to the podcast owners. So,
How about the mixer and the sound recorder?
the mixer and the sound recorder?
Yeah.
Did you say how are they or what are they?
Yeah, I'm asking about like how expensive are they?
I want to say that the mic, the mixer, and the audio recorder might have run me, if I had bought them all at the same shop, might have been like $300.
Oh.
The mixer was under $100 if I remember correctly. The mic was like 80. The sound recorder, believe it or not, was like 110. That was the most expensive piece out of the whole thing. Then all the cables to connect everything might have cost me another $30 or so. So, yeah, it's not terribly expensive. It was enough that I had to think about it before doing it. That's all. All right. Going once. Going twice. Okay, we're good. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming.